Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. International News Review.
Good morning. We are back with Steve Oken in the International News Review. Good morning, Steve. Steve, what surprised you most this week?
You know, literally nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing. You wake up in the morning, you see the news, nothing.
Yeah.
However, I went to an event on Wednesday night this week.
I knew it.
Neil Humphreys was there in a suit. My eyes popped out of my head.
I do wear one occasionally. You know, it's funerals and events with Steve Oken. That's the only time I wear a suit.
It's actually surprising. He cleans up very well. Very well.
I didn't
very dapper.
I didn't recognize him. I figured how many other 6'8" British giants are there in Singapore?
Well, I'm still hoping for the James Bond gig. You know, it hasn't come around just yet, but I'm still hoping.
Yeah, well, okay, let's move on. Ukraine in the news. Looks like there might be a deal for minerals and the U.S. and whatever that means for some kind of peace process. In the meantime, Trump this week criticized Putin and for bombing Kyiv. There's a lot of what do we make of what's actually happening in the Russia-Ukrainian war right now?
Well, I certainly have a new answer anytime I said something that was wrong and I get called out on it. Because when Donald Trump was asked, you said you were going to solve this in 24 hours. It's now coming up on 100 days. What happened? He said, well, obviously it was just in jest what I said. So that's my go-to now. We're headed.
So he's saying very close, in quotes, are very close to a deal, is what Trump said.
Well, the problem is, what is the deal? And it's not really a deal if Ukraine doesn't get an agreement on what happens, and this is getting shoved down their throats. And why we really need to watch this all over the world, not just in Ukraine and Russia, not just in Europe, is that this is the direction Donald Trump seemingly wants to go in the world to go into, which is a return to spheres of influence, where Russia gets to do what it wants to do in its sphere, and China gets to do what it wants to do in its sphere, and the U.S. gets to do what it wants to do in this sphere. Because this deal that what we're reading about being imposed upon Ukraine is giving Russia basically almost everything it wants and is forcing Ukraine to accept all of the harm that has come to it from Putin's illegal, unlawful, horrific invasion into that country.
That is a great point, Steve. It does feel like we're heading towards pre-First World War spheres of influence. And I bring up Vitaly Klitschko, who, of course, is the mayor of Kiev. He said this week, one of the scenarios is to give up territory. This is the mayor of Kyiv, just to reiterate. It's not fair, he says, but for peace, for temporary peace, maybe it's the only solution. Steve, let's bring it back home. What does that mean for smaller, vulnerable nations like Singapore, when essentially you invade a smaller sovereign nation like Ukraine, you make gains, you force a peace deal, and you keep all of your gains? What does it say for Singapore? What does it say for the rest of the world?
What's it say for almost every country?
Other countries in Europe as well when it comes to Russia.
Right. I mean, like as an American, and I go back to, post-World War II era, the spheres of influence. Neil, as a European, you bring up the Concert of Europe from the 1800s.
Thank you.
And that's right. That is the direction that we're seemingly going in under President Trump, which is very different than what we had under Trump in his first term. In Trump's first term, it was about superpower competition, about competition between the U.S. and China. Here, it's seemingly about collaboration with the U.S. and China, where you do what you want, we do what we want, and we don't interfere with one another. And small states, obviously Singapore being one of the smallest in terms of population, being obviously very powerful from an economic perspective. But this has to be concerning to Singapore from a global geopolitical perspective, and it has to be concerning to every country in this part of the world, because if we do go down this path to spheres of influence, and China's sphere of influence includes the Straits and the South China Sea, what is that going to mean? And that's something that everybody has to be very concerned about. Businesses, investors, governments, everybody.
Well, when you consider that we're closing in on probably 900,000 killed and more than that wounded in this conflict, give or take the numbers, we don't know exactly what they are, but those are some of the estimates. It's ludicrous that we are at a place where one nation can invade another in the 21st century and literally get away with murder. and then keep the gains that they've gotten. You know,
and that's the deal on the table that Trump is pushing right now, is that Ukraine gets formal recognition of its illegal annexation of Crimea. It gets the territory it has now without formal recognition, the provinces it's taken in eastern Ukraine, that Ukraine has to commit to never being allowed to join NATO. All the sanctions that had been imposed on Russia going back to 2014 and then upped in 2022, all of those go away. And literally, Ukraine gets nothing. No security guarantees from the United States, nothing. And it sends...
Not exactly a well-rounded deal, is it, for Ukraine?
No, and that's the key point. It's worth remembering that just before this big meeting between Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Russia, there was a senior Russian military official killed in a car explosion. No responsibility has been attributed yet, but the blast, according to reports, does look similar in nature to previous attacks on Russians that were later claimed by Ukraine. The point being, they're not going to go quietly. So does a peace deal still sound like wishful thinking? It's making an assumption that the Ukrainians are just going to bend over and call it a day.
Well, this is the point that President Zelensky brought up in that infamous now Oval Office meeting, a couple months ago, where you can't, they said, take a peace deal. I think that's what J.D. Vance was saying. With Putin, he doesn't commit. The commitments he makes are worthless. There is no peace deal. There is no agreement with Putin. There was no agreement after 2014. There's no agreement now.
There is no is.
And that's what Zelensky's saying. Right. And he's, of course, 100% right. And so you can't, you're going to force Zelensky to sign something with somebody who doesn't live up to any of their commitments, who illegally and unlawfully, invaded your country, killed your people, kidnapped your children, committed war crimes. For what? And so we are, even if something is forced down the Ukrainians' throats.
No, the rest of Europe should be very, very worried. In fact, at 11:15 today, we're going to have Jacob Brix on, the Danish ambassador to Singapore, and we will definitely ask him his thoughts. I know he is not shy talking about this particular point, but we'll talk to Ambassador Brix a little bit later on in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's move on, Steve. It's a worthy topic to discuss for the entire hour, but we do need to move on. Malaysia tells the U.S. that it is open to talks on deficits and non-tariff barriers to reduce tariffs. Malaysia and the U.S. is not one of the biggest markets. This isn't really one of the most contentious trade tariff discussions, is it? Why is this important?
Well, the magic words here are non-tariff barriers, and I think this story and the next one are going to fall into the category of just because Donald Trump says something, just because Peter Navarro, his trade expert, says something, doesn't make it wrong. Okay, there are serious problems in this part of the world when it comes to what we call non-tariff barriers, right? So obviously the tariffs, a country can put up tariffs and say, if you want to export into our country, you're going to have to pay a tax. And typically speaking, taxes are higher coming into Asia than they are going into the United States. But the issue is, that's really irrelevant for the most part when it comes to tariffs.
Why?
Because the U.S. has very low tariffs on Cambodia. Cambodia has very high tariffs on the U.S. We're not selling anything to Cambodia anyway. They can't afford to buy anything we make. And what are we going to do? Start making T-shirts in the United States? Why would we tariff Cambodian T-shirts? Because we want those textiles. It's better to have lower costs for our consumers in the United States. So just because tariffs are mismatched does not make them bad. Yes, you may want to use tariffs selectively for a tool if there are specific unfair trade practices, or if there is a very specific sector you need to protect, not for trade reasons, but for national security reasons. And you can make arguments, in particular in the auto sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, on this. But the issue is not lowering tariffs. We don't really care if the tariffs get lowered, because if the tariffs are low, but the non-tariff barriers are high, you still can't come into that country. So it's the non-tariff barriers that hurt U.S. businesses, hurt U.S. investment, not just U.S., all foreign businesses and investment. So what are non-tariff barriers, right? These are the things that happen behind the border. So, yeah, you can bring your good in. Oh, but by the way, you can't own a company here because of foreign direct investment restrictions. Or we're going to require you to localize all of your data here. So you're going to have to build huge, massive data centers as opposed to storing it in the cloud. Or we're not going to allow for cross-border data flows. Or we're going to have massive corruption issues. And so even though you're here, you have to pay bribes for you to be here. These are all non-tariff barriers. And a lot of the governments here want to and recognize they should be reducing their non-tariff barriers. But they can't do so because of domestic political reasons. It could be oligarchs are preventing them from doing what they need to do. It could be political interests like farmers, agriculture. And so often in free trade agreement negotiations or in the TPP or otherwise, the governments here can use, in this case, Trump as an excuse to say, we have to do this. Look, he's hammering us. We have to do this. And they want to do it, but they can't do it politically. So if we can get non-tariff barriers eliminated here, it helps everybody. And that is what that headline from Malaysia recognizes. And we should be seeing this everywhere. And let's hope the Trump administration focuses on non-tariff barriers and not on tariffs.
That's the economic point of view. From a geopolitical standpoint, you would expect this, right? After the big meeting between China and Malaysia, isn't this just Malaysia keeping the US on side? It's not like they're going to say they'd be closed off to talks with the US, is it? You would expect Malaysia to come out and have these talks after their meeting with China.
I mean, not necessarily, because China is in some ways a much bigger threat to the Malaysian economy than is the United States. Because, first of all, China doesn't buy nearly as much as the U.S. China is an economic powerhouse, but is an economic powerhouse more as from an exporting perspective, whereas the U.S. is importing, right? The U.S. is bringing everything in to buy. Malaysia, it's much more important to have access, or it's as important to have access. So that's one issue. The other issue that not just the Malaysians, but every country in this part of the world and in Europe and others are really afraid of is that the Chinese, who sell massive amounts to the United States, if that market gets blocked off, they're going to dump all of their products into Southeast Asia. And what happens is that is going to hollow out the domestic manufacturing markets here. And it is, and Chinese investment is different than other types of FDI in terms of who gets hired, where does the money go, how much does this lift up the broader ecosystem and not just the people in that one sector. And that's why you see tariffs going from Southeast Asia onto China. There's tariffs from Thailand onto China, Indonesia into China. Russia has tariffs onto China because they don't want those products dumped. And dumped is an economic term. It's a trade term. It's not that these are bad products or that they're lousy products. The problem is they're very good products, except they're just done with state subsidies that makes them so cheap. And so, no, don't think that Xi Jinping's visit for the three countries for a couple of days has solved all the problems that Southeast Asia has with China. And if anything, if you want to read what did Xi Jinping say when he got back to China? He threatened, more or less, countries saying, don't you dare work with the United States and attack China. So I don't know that he necessarily had such a successful visit. Maybe, hundreds of deals were signed, but were they significant? Does it change anything? I wouldn't put too much weight into that yet.
Interesting. All right, we got to move on. Speaking of relationships between Asia and North America, California just passed Japan as the fourth largest global economy. Now, the GDP of California hit $4.1 trillion in 2024, and Japan's was only at $4.01 trillion. So now California trails just Germany, China, and the U.S. as the world's largest economy, fourth largest economy now. Why is that important? Is this a recalibrating of economic strength around the world? Why do we care about this story, Steve?
Well, I think, one, it shows that where the California economy continues to grow is in what we call the trade and services, right? I mean, it's all of the technology that comes out of California. It's all of not the manufacturing that's driving California's economy. I mean, there's, of course, manufacturing in California, but there's more than that. And it shows how an economy in the United States can be successful in the 21st century. Conversely, it also shows that Japan is is so serious of an issue because of their decreasing and aging population. I mean, Japan is shrinking, and Japan's workforce
and it has been for 30 years. I mean, this is nothing new, right?
Well, no, that it's shrinking is nothing new, but now that these people are getting older, social care costs are ballooning, which is hitting the economy.
Right.
So, and you see this issue in Japan. You saw it here. We talked about it on air about 4 months ago, where Elon Musk said the same thing was going to happen to Singapore, that Singapore is dying. Singapore is going to go away because Singapore's, birth rate is better than Japan's, but it's below 2. It's not where it needs to be. But Singapore, on the other hand, brings in foreign talent, much more so than Japan. You see this debate playing out in the election now. Is there too much foreign talent? Is it being done the right way? I think Singapore's population, for the first time ever, just ticked over 6 million, which is a lot larger than when the three of us arrived, 15, 20, 25 years ago. But Singapore is addressing it. Japan is not. So it's both a 21st century story into how you're going to make money, and it is also should be a real wake-up call to what happens as we have declining population growth.
That is exactly my point. Many countries, as Glenn alluded to, aging populations, rising healthcare costs, declining birth rates. They are not unique to Japan, obviously. They exist across the developed world right now. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a country more isolationist than Japan. Culturally, linguistically, racially, let's be very honest here, they've been very closed doors for many, many years to foreign talent, amongst other things. Is it too late for them? And could they even change at this point?
It's not too late, but that's the better question, Neil, you just asked. Can they change? They're going to have to, but when are they going to do it? You're going to have to bring in somebody to care for all of these people who are getting so old. You're going to have to bring in people to work to replace all of the people who are retiring. When are they going to do it? How quickly can they do it? And culturally, what is the impact going to be in Japan?
That's a big one.
I mean, you live there, Glenn. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. Of all the countries I've visited, I was shocked at how closed off Japan is to the outside world.
Having lived there for nearly 6 years back in the 80s and early 90s, I've never met more truly kind and helpful people than Japanese. But I've also rarely seen more of an insular society when it comes to protecting their own identity and the things that make Japan Japan. Now, that, too, has changed in the last 35 years. It is opening up more, but it still is a challenge, like it is with many countries. People want to protect their way of life and their heritage and their culture, and Japan is in that mode as well. Okay, we do have to move on. Last night, I saw this news, and it really, really troubled me. A Milwaukee County Circuit judge in the U.S. was arrested by the FBI Friday, charged in federal court for allegedly helping undocumented immigrants avoid arrest. Judge Hannah Dugan is facing 2 charges for obstruction and concealing. The individual from arrest has made an initial appearance in court and was released, obviously pending how the rest of this goes. I find this egregious. Steve, I think you are going to take a contrary point of view on this.
You're going to make me defend the Trump administration for the second time this morning?
Arresting a judge. Yes, I'm going to make you do that.
This judge should not have done what she did. Look, there is an illegal alien in the United States. He got deported in 2013. He came back illegally. He was wanted for domestic abuse. This person should have been arrested. No question, this person should have been arrested. The person had to go to a courthouse on a different on a different matter. And so the FBI, the immigration authorities, Customs and Border Protection, the DEA get an arrest warrant to arrest him in the courthouse, which is frankly the best place you can arrest him because he had to go through screening. You know he's not going to have a weapon on him. You know there's nowhere for him to go. You have him isolated. That's exactly what should have been done. The illegal alien is in the Judge Dugan's court on a different matter. They go with an arrest warrant to arrest him, and she says no. You can't arrest him, not in my court, get out of my court, you have the wrong warrant, go talk to the chief judge. So while that's happening and they're waiting outside her courtroom to arrest him, she sneaks him out of the courtroom in through a jury door into a non-public area to avoid arrest. And then there is now a chase when the federal agents figure out what happened.
Courthouse chase.
And you've made things dangerous now. Because now what is this guy going to do? Now he's on the run. This judge was 100% wrong in what she did. She should have never done that. And it is and say what you want about the Trump administration's immigration policies. You can make an argument you shouldn't arrest somebody in a courthouse because this will have a chilling effect on other people not wanting to come to the courthouse and it's going to hurt justice. You can make that argument and we can have that debate elsewhere. But if you are going to say to the Trump administration, you have to obey the courts. You have to follow the law. You have to follow what the courts say. You have to follow the Constitution. And then this judge doesn't, and this judge obstructs, then she was wrong. And she should be held to account. Now, how was she arrested? And we could debate that later. But I'm taking fully on the side that Judge Dugan was wrong in what she did. And certainly, she could have asked to get that warrant reviewed, but to sneak him out, that is not what she should have done.
I don't know this judge's politics. I'm guessing she's a Democrat. I mean, does it matter? The reason I say that is because listening to you, Steve, I didn't expect you to take that view, but now I understand the intricacies of it. Of course, I see your point of view. It's unfortunate these kinds of, and I'm going to put inverted commas, political stunts, if you will, that actually plays directly into the hands of the MAGA movement, and they'll say this is a typical Democrat kind of prank, in inverted commas, that just makes us bed in further with the MAGA movement. Is this a move that is completely backfired for anyone on the left side of politics in America?
Well, look, and if you also look at the polling on Donald Trump and immigration, he got elected on two issues, inflation and immigration, and his poll numbers are now underwater on both. He has gone way too far on immigration. He has ignored the courts, or certainly the Justice Department has ignored the courts, has not complied with court laws in deporting people who had the legal right to be in the United States and sending them to jail in El Salvador. And so because of how harsh and how politicized Trump has made immigration, you then get this judge who should not have done what she did, but you understand it into the system. And then, Neil, it makes it, as you just said, everything becomes politicized. Everything is us versus them. And that's why I think you should say, in this instance, this is not an us versus them. What she did was wrong. If you're going to call out Trump on what he does is wrong, which is often on immigration, it wasn't, and it wasn't him, of course, it wasn't Trump, it was the FBI and the immigration authorities. This is the problem we have in the United States now. We're so hyper-partisan, it's awful.
Got it. Yeah, Neil?
No, I was just messaging Max.
Got it. Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking to me. We got a lot of hand motions going on out in here that you can't see. All right, finally, we got about 30 seconds to talk about this. China will let scientists from 6 countries, a good news story, including the U.S., examine the rocks it collected from the moon recently. Scientific collaboration that comes as the 2 countries remain locked in battle. Isn't it nice that we can all get along at least on some things?
Hey, look, we all recognize when the AI overlords come and take over this planet,
And this radio studio.
We're going to have to collectively go to the moon, and so thank God the Americans and the Chinese are working together in other countries.
Right.
Look, I watched the Apollo 13 documentary this week. It's fabulous. Jim Lovell, who of course was on the crew, Apollo 13, they nearly all died, but they made it back. He famously said when he saw the Earth from the moon, he doesn't see borders,
right.
He doesn't see countries, he doesn't see boundaries or race, he just sees one planet. Why can't we all just get along?
The most iconic photo ever. Maybe, right?
The little blue ball.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thanks very much, Steve. We won't see you next week because we have election coverage next week. The week after, you're out of the...
No. I'm here May 10th.
Jeez, okay.
I am
can't keep up
here
with you.
May 10th.
All right. So we'll see you back on May 10th.
I want to get Neil's full breakdown on the election.
We will maybe do that or maybe not. Talk to you later. Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.